empathy and develop your managers into leaders. Empathy and develop your managers into leaders.
Hello, everyone. There she goes.
We had a little bit of a technical difficulty there. Hey, folks, it's the magic of working from home. And so just logged in under my colleague's account to get back in. And so, Hakimia, thank you so much. Holding down the fort. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and for choosing to be part of the conversation today on how to lead with empathy and develop your managers into leaders. My name's Asia Smith, and I'm an executive leadership coach on the ThinkHuman team. And for those who are here, you've probably already seen Hakimia, and you'll see much more of her throughout this conversation along with the panelists. I'm tuning in from the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, Maryland more specifically today, but I know we've got an international crowd with us. So let's take a moment to connect and let us know in the chat what your name is and where you're dialing in from today. Let's see who we've got in the room with us. Okay. Oh, I see Arizona. Someone else from Maryland. That's really great. We've got Toronto, Colorado. Oh, I see Nigeria. Very nice. Very nice. Well, a warm welcome to all those folks who just got a shout out and to everyone who's here sharing this space with us today. We're so grateful to have you here. Please take from this conversation whatever you need to serve you and your growth. And don't let the growth stop here. We encourage connecting with a teammate, a friend, a loved one, or perhaps even a coach or a therapist to talk through all of this so you can take care of yourself and feel empowered to continue the discussion in your community. So let's get warmed up a little bit more in the chat for today's conversation and let us know, what does leading with empathy look like to you? Just to level set a little bit, what does empathy look like to you? Looks like we have some more intros. Okay, perfect. I see listening, being a good listener, listening to understand, putting yourself in the shoes of others, kindness, a lot around listening. And so that's really great. And there's so much more to it, right? And so it's really great to see folks interacting in the chat with that. And I think you all are going to be really excited to hear just the gems of information that our panelists have to share. So throughout the webinar, if you feel energized to say something, as you're seeing the chat light up right now, don't hesitate to share, comment, and ask questions. This is all really great input so far, and your presence and contribution always makes the conversation richer. You might spark a thought for someone in the room, or we all might learn something from what you have to say. And with all that being said, this webinar wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for our fantastic partners and the commitment and heartfelt work of our team and leadership at ThinkHuman to provide a safe and brave space for real conversations in the world like this one. So I'm thrilled to announce ThinkHuman and our partners for today's webinar. Starting with ThinkHuman, we're a leadership development organization that supports human resources and learning and development leaders with implementing community-centered and experiential-based leadership programs that are built to support a culture of belonging. And the leadership training programs that we offer, in particular, our flagship programs, Leader Lab and Mini Lab, are designed to create mindset shifts and behavioral change over time that sticks. So toward the end of the webinar, you'll see a poll that pops up so you can let us know if you're interested in hearing from ThinkHuman and our partners. And in the meantime, I'll also put my meeting link in the chat, just in case there's anyone here who already knows you want to meet with us. Feel free to sign up for a time, and I'd love to connect. Next up, for our partners, we have PIN, which is the world's first global employee communication tool. And it helps companies cut through the noise to stay connected and calm through hyper relevant communication. So whether it's the best way to approach a performance conversation or a nudge to order a gift card for an employee's birthday, or automatic outreach at key moments like the first day on the job, to a promotion, to running your first one-on-one, PIN is there for workplace moments big and small. And last but not least, we have Culture Amp, which is a people and culture platform that makes it easy to collect, understand, and take action on feedback throughout the entire employee life cycle. Culture Amp revolutionizes how over 25 million employees across 4,000 companies create a better world of work. As the global platform leader for employee experience, Culture Amp empowers companies of all sizes and industries to transform employee engagement, develop high-performing teams, and retain talent with cutting-edge research, powerful technology, and the world's largest employee data set in the world. Before we dive into the webinar, we're almost there. We'd also like to share an artistic moment as we clear our minds and settle in for this conversation. So we hope that this helps you feel grounded and open for today's discussion. Blessing us with her gifts today, we have Kristen Ford. Kristen is a Nashville-based singer, songwriter, and a multi-instrumentalist. She's played over 1,500 shows and performed in 48 states and 6 countries. Her latest album, War in the Living Room, is out now and can be enjoyed on your favorite music streaming platforms. So without further ado, Kristen, take it away.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I feel stressed, you can tie me to this desk. I cannot break away because of what my coworkers say. I'm stressed, yeah, I'm stressed, you can tie me to this desk. Ain't no breaking away because of what the boss says, yeah. If you're feeling sorry for yourself, won't you put your place with someone else? So if you're feeling sorry for yourself, just take a walk in their shoes. Take a walk, you ain't got nothing to lose except maybe a little bigger heart. I could do their job in my sleep. I don't know why they earn that salary. Yeah, I don't know what they get paid, but I'm sure it's more than me, and I can't sleep, cause I'm chained to this desk. Yeah, I feel stressed, you can tie me to this desk. I cannot break away because of what the boss man say, but if you're feeling sorry for yourself, won't you just take a little time to think about things from the perspective of somebody else? Cause you don't know that their kid had a fever last night, and you don't know that they paid their way through their school, and you don't know that they speak Spanish as their first language, but they keep it cool, yeah. You don't know anything about them, but you could if you would just try to listen. Don't feel stressed, don't feel tied to your desk. Feel connected, yeah, connect, cause it's too big to do it on your own, be honest. Don't be stressed, you ain't tied to your desk, cause you connected with empathy, yeah, yeah. With empathy, yeah, yeah. With empathy, oh, yeah, yeah. Don't be stressed, yeah, go take a walk. Thanks so much, y'all.
And thank you so much for your time and that beautiful song. Really appreciate it. And welcome, everyone. I am Hakimia Jackson, Global Executive Coach, DI Board Advisor and CEO of Divinely Power. And today I will be your ThinkHuman moderator. And yes, let's connect through empathy. So welcome to Lead with Empathy and Develop Your Managers into Leaders. You know, I want you to lean in with me a little bit. Many businesses are solidifying their remote or hybrid approaches to the workplace. For the most innovative technologies to building people cultures, If the past few years has taught you anything, it's that empathic leadership is a key differentiator between a good manager and a great one. According to the research done by Center for Creative Leadership, today successful leaders must be more person-focused and able to collaborate effectively with people from various teams, departments, cultures, nationalities, and backgrounds. Their study also showed that empathy in the workplace is positively related to job performance. The empathy you receive at work makes you a better team partner. Empathic leadership makes room for connection, intimacy, honesty. It drives innovation and engagement. So gone are the days of categorizing empathy as a soft skill. It's a vital skill that's needed to be successful and impactful for your organization. So from the words of Maya Angelou, I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you even did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And guess what, community? Today, we hope that you never forget how these brilliant minds make you feel. So please, let's show some love to Stacy, Head of Employee Experience at Penn, Patty, Senior People Scientist at Culture Amp, and Lauren, Head of Growth at ThinkHuman. Welcome, brilliant minds. And so starting with Stacy, I loved how you put it before during our connection call. Please elaborate a little bit further on how you define empathy.
Yes, awesome. I would love to. And also I'm like shifting in this moment because I was like into the music and I'm like, wait,
Yes.
you're a panelist. You need to actually get ready to speak.
Yes.
So, hello, everyone.
Can't get down anymore.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that's interesting, so I'll share also, I have a master's in counseling psychology and for a period of time was going to get my license as a therapist. So I have, real deep thoughts about what empathy is and isn't. And I think, people have this sense that empathy means you have to be very emotional and you have to get in with somebody and like plumb their emotional depths. And that's not quite what it is. And I think there's also this concept of, it's putting yourself in another person's shoes. And I think that's also not quite what it is either, because the idea is if you are putting yourself in someone else's shoes, you're kind of using your own lens and you're making assumptions about that person's shoes, basically, right? Which doesn't take into account like their whole lived experience. It's really centering you still. So for me, like empathy is really about that, like attempt to listen, understand, and thoughtfully spend time with someone to truly understand what their experience is and what their feelings are. And a lot of that is about curiosity and listening. And so for me, that's really like, I kind of want to shift the thought of what being empathetic is to a little bit more in that direction.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Stacey. I really do appreciate it because it is an element of, I don't know fully what this person is experiencing. So I have to be okay with not knowing, but also be open to exploring, like you said, that curiosity. Patty, Lauren, anything else to add to that?
One thing I would add is I think like how beautiful it feels to feel seen and to feel heard. Like that's like the human impact of empathy and being able to be seen as your whole self and know that someone is actively trying to understand. And like you said, Stacey, like the curiosity, that's so critical. And it's something that we have to like see authentically.
Yes, not performative, right?
I would definitely agree with both points. I think a lot of times leaders overly focus on that emotional component and kind of getting into the weeds with others when it comes to empathy. But really, to Lauren and Stacey's point, it's about, engaging in that discovery, engaging in that perspective taking, and truly trying to understand on a deeper level. So moving beyond just the feelings and the experience, but really taking a step back to hear the other person in their truest form.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing, Patty. And Danita, hopefully I'm saying your name correctly. Please forgive me, but Danita says empathic leadership starts with letting go of one's ego. So along that same vein, how have you seen empathy displayed, like from your leaders in a healthy way, or even in excess? What did that look like?
Yeah, I like the idea of, you're letting go of your own ego. And like I said, it's when you're not centering yourself in that exchange, right? And so when I think about, the experiences I've had, it's really where I feel like the focus is on me. and to Lauren's point, that someone is making a true attempt to understand what my experience is, to listen to me, not to, just respond with do this, do that, or what their assumption is about how I should be feeling, am feeling, or anything like that. It's really that I feel the center of the experience.
Yeah.
To Stacy's point, I think a lot of times what I've seen with managers is they'll automatically go to those tactical things like, what are the next steps? How, what do we do to address this, instead of taking that step back to understand? And so I think when I've experienced, the best empathy from leaders is when they've really taken the time, one, to validate the experience, because oftentimes, they'll sometimes without meaning to, managers and leaders will really say, well, is that really a problem, or is that really a challenge, rather than saying, wow, that situation actually is very frustrating, or that really does sound like a difficult challenge. And then really probing further to understand why that's a challenge. What is really going on? What is it that you're experiencing? And again, taking that step back. So to what was said earlier about removing the ego, that's a perfect way to say it, because I think in excess, oftentimes what that looks like is when the leader truly tries to get too deep in, and they can't be a thought partner to that person on their team to help them through the situation, or provide them with the resources or the context that they would need in order to kind of proceed forward.
Yeah, Patty, you made me think about a leader that felt as though, because I'm coming to assist you, it was as if their solution was the answer to my problem or my issue. And that's in excess. No, it's not. I want to go to Sky's comment. Sky says, I know leaders who are like, empathy is too touchy-feely and seems to mentally flick it away. So on the other hand, we have leaders out here that says, hey, I recognize that empathy in this new age of leadership, in this future of work, is needed. But you also have leaders that are trying to hold on to pre-pandemic leadership, and they just don't give a damn, right? Come to work and do your job and then go home. All the other stuff I can care less about. What are your thoughts there?
I think the thing with empathy, and I think I'm a deeply empathetic person, and I've worked for deeply empathetic organizations. I've had the privilege of doing that. But there's like in the realm of business, there's like a balance that we have to have of like task orientation and effectiveness and empathy. And if that scale like shifts too far one way or the other, we end up becoming too task oriented. We don't like care about people. We're just focused on like getting results, versus like purely people oriented, which may come at the expense of the results. And I think more impactfully, if we're like diving in and acting too like aggressively on empathy towards one individual employee, we may be putting undue burden on others in the organization to like make up for that. And then it becomes really almost an equity or inclusion issue at that point. So that balance is it's nuanced and complicated. And I think especially a lot of our like heart-led organizations, we have to like step back and be like, okay, like how do I listen? How do I make somebody feel heard? And how do I make sure that like the actions that I'm taking don't put more onto others and cause more of an issue?
Yeah. And it aligns to Kel's comment here, where it says empathy also requires you to have solid boundaries as well as self awareness, so you know where you are and where the other is, how to keep that clear. And Lauren, I heard you were like, oh, what are your thoughts there? And please, everyone else, please chime in.
I mean, I think like one of the things as a people leader, sometimes we can like take on all of our employees like emotional
Ish.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Stacey, I think we talked about this like in our pre-call, like managers aren't therapists. We're not equipped for that. That's not really our role. And so it's understanding how to like have those boundaries like with yourself, how to like not take it on your shoulders too much, while also like providing the right amount of empathy for the circumstance.
Yeah, I think when I see some of the comments about like, oh, managers don't want to be involved, I think that's partially because, as we started off, I said, I think people have a certain concept of what empathy means. So I would maybe challenge their idea and work with them on, okay, well, what are you trying to avoid? Because I think what they're trying to avoid is what Lauren just said. They don't want to, their thought is, oh, now I'm responsible for the emotional well-being, of my employee and, and their lives. Right. And it's like, you should not be in the role of the therapist. That is not your skill. That is outside of your scope. That is, if it gets to where someone really needs, a level of help that's outside of your scope, that's where you connect them to services or the benefits that are available within the organization. So I think it is that you kind of need to push back on them a little bit to challenge what it is that they're averse to, because it could just be reframing what it means for them and reframing. And I know Patty, knows a lot about this and has talked about this. What is that? What is it in the business context? How does that go? What does that look like in terms of performance? And that is the shift that you need to help them make.
Yeah.
And Stacey, just to add on to that, I will say that when there's hesitation from the managers or the leaders, at times it is, just that concern about the emotional component and not being well equipped to address that. The other side of the coin is that there's no time or bandwidth for that. Yes. Managers themselves have a lot on their plates, and then taking that on, like Lauren said and Stacey said, it just adds on a lot more. And so this is the part where high-level leadership and organizations at a whole, from the top down, really need to take a step back and understand what is, the priority here, what is the type of culture they're trying to build, and really look at, what type of workloads are they assigning to their managers. If they're overworked, they're not going to be able to engage in true empathy with their teams. If you're setting really high targets and metrics for your managers to meet from a business perspective, again, unfortunately, they're likely going to over leverage their team, creating all of these dynamics that would require empathy, but have no time or capacity to address. And then ultimately, we also need to make sure that our organizations have policies that are flexible and align with one another, so that if we were to leverage them, there is that support infrastructure. So for instance, if somebody needs to take leave urgently, that there is kind of the support infrastructure so that not the rest of the team doesn't get overburdened by work, and then the manager is trying to carry the load and support everyone and keep them afloat. So really making sure that leadership is being strategic about how work is being distributed, making sure that the targets and goals that are being set align to strategy, but also are considerate of your people and their resources, and then having policies in place to really support them. So managers are less hesitant to take on, this other piece of the pie, essentially.
Well said, Patty. Really do appreciate it. And along those same lines, when you talk about having those policies in place to support it, do you feel as though empathy looks different now in this hybrid work environment versus in person?
So I think at its core, empathy, when it comes to that behavioral, cognitive perspective, is pretty much the same. Now, this is something that we discussed in our prep call, and Stacey spoke to it as well. It just needs to be more intentional now. Whenever there's hybrid or, fully remote first arrangements in the workplace, you really, as a manager and a leader, need to be more intentional, because it's not that you're going to be seeing the body language or, getting these signals or informal conversations where then you could kind of engage in that, discovery, validation, all of those empathic behaviors. You need to make the time and the space for it.
Yes.
So really being intentional during your one-on-ones with your employees to make the space for having that open, honest, two-way dialogue. Also ensuring that if you're in a hybrid environment, making sure that there's equity there. Oftentimes, people that are there in person just have that recency bias. They get a little bit more of that attention. And so for those that are at home, making sure that they are able to have that time and space to have that dialogue with their managers.
Yeah, and I'd add to that, it's definitely like intention is important, is super important in making it happen. And I think if you are, dialing in a lot, or if you are fully remote and parts of your team are in office, or whatever the kind of structure looks like, one of the shifts I've had to make for myself, and so is top of mind for me, is that a meeting, you often have an agenda, you have an objective, there's something you're trying to get out of it. And so you forget that some of this personal connection time is actually productive, important time as well. And
Correct.
So you have to kind of remind yourself like, oh, this is not the, let's just get into the meeting time, like the beginning where people are kind of checking in. That's an important part of that meeting time as well, and should be a part of every meeting. So, for us at PIN, we start all of our team meetings with a temp check, which is just, how are you doing today? It's not work related. It's not a status update. It's how are you doing? So I can understand what are some of the things that are going on in your life? What are some of the things that might be affecting, how you're coming into work that day, anything like that. And it's really like that gives you that brief lens that you need, that if you didn't take that time, you wouldn't know about that for that person that day. So it really is about carving out that time and making the mental shift that this is an important use of your time.
Yes. And Stacey, just hearing your thoughts just made me think about, changing your belief system on why empathy and connection is so important. I'm not doing this to check the box. And someone said it in the chat, it has to be genuine, because your staff is going to know when it's performative. So setting that time up, and to be real, you don't just have to own this, right? Open up the opportunity to connect and build empathy with your people. I believe that's really important. But Lauren, I want to pull you into the conversation, because there was something that Patty said, and I know you mentioned it as well, specifically just around just the business and the process need for empathy, and it looking different in the hybrid workplace versus in person. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I like really see when we're talking to companies right now, especially as they're coming back in, is exactly what Patty said around like making sure like to check like your recency bias. And I think going a little bit further than that is also, as a leader, like different leaders and different people are going to have different perspectives on whether co-location is better, like in person, hybrid, or fully remote. And as a leader, you have to really take into account like what is the company's policy and overarching perspective on that, and set aside your own perspective on that, or your own like righteousness about like, say, co-location being better. So that because your own interpretation of that is not actually empathy. You have to kind of be able to see past your own perspective and set that aside to really do that properly.
Anyone else? All right, so we are going to move along. Something comes to mind for me specifically around just encouraging, because I'm watching the chat going and I'm listening to what you said, and we still have people here that's saying, I'm still trying to figure out that balance and how to do it in the meeting. So how do you encourage individuals to lead with empathy when senior leadership may not align with the stance? You know, right? I'm managing a team and I know leading with empathy is important, but my senior leadership is undermining my efforts. So what are your thoughts there? What are some recommendations that some of these people leaders could implement?
Well, I mean, I think I might have some like bad news with that perspective that like feels like bad news. I think what we see is, you know, organizational norms don't normally get better than the behavior and expectation set of like the most senior leaders in your organization, because, you know, what they do expands. And if the CEO or most of the C-suite just doesn't care about that, you're going to see that in the what's rewarded in the organization. You're going to see that in their actions and the way they display themselves, like to the company. You know, you can have some impact with like key influencers in an organization. If you have like an executive or two that doesn't have that, they can like move the needle. But unless you have like true, like full buy-in from your C-level and leadership expectations defined around this, you're not really going to see it, especially like equally distributed across the organization. And I think it's also important too, to make sure that the organization actually values this.
Yes.
This is not something that can be lip service. Mm-hmm. And if you like put a lot of like fluffy, lovely language into your own values and like what you say you value, but you don't actually show it and you don't see senior leaders actually doing that, you're going to have people be very confused as to why they're like living up to the values in the organization, but they're seeing others being rewarded for, say, more performance-oriented mindsets.
Yeah, if you don't recognize it, reward it, incentivize it, it's not in your performance evaluations, anything like that, then the company doesn't value it, and you can't expect that it's going to happen on an organizational level, unfortunately.
Patty?
I mean, I 100% am in alignment with Lauren and Stacy. I think the only other thing I would add is if leadership really needs a business case to be made for empathy, I mean, we see a very strong business case, actually. It's not just soft skills or fluffy skills. Lauren said this best, empathy is a power skill, and it really makes those dynamics. And Lauren, thank you for that, because it was a great way to describe it. It really makes people be able to do their work more effectively. So it's not just this, you know, fluffy emotional thing. It really does help with productivity, the way that people are able to really focus and really innovate. And so oftentimes when we see more empathy, we actually see higher scores on belonging, as well as critical factors that really drive engagement. And in turn, engagement at the end of the day drives revenue, it drives innovation, and it drives, you know, the bottom line for the business. And so that is something I would keep top of mind as, you know, you're in your organization and trying to maybe champion empathy with senior leaders.
Yes, yes. And Dorleen says, surveying employees and keeping a close eye on attrition. If the C-suite doesn't care, turnover will likely be high. And that is so true. The chat is definitely off the chain, very vibrant. So I'm trying to keep up with the questions as well as the commentary. Leah says, this is so spot on. Thank you, Lauren. Leaders need to understand that the workforce has changed. In Sharon, to Sharon's point, right? The workforce has changed. So we need to actively evolve with it. So as you see empathy evolve, what are some new things that you're seeing, you know, in organizations or just in the market regarding empathy, you know, and tying it to manager development? Are there any new, you know, tools or programs? Lauren, I know ThinkHuman has a couple. What are some of those things?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Hakimia, we've actually developed a program like specifically around this, focused on, it's called Grow Lab. It's focused on three things. So empathy at work, personal accountability, and courageous conversations. And all of this requires a growth mindset, like to level set. But around empathy, like when we're trying to teach and elevate empathy in organizations and in particular leaders, it's about like helping them demonstrate a heightened self-awareness. So like first we have to like look inward and understand ourselves and be able to like communicate properly. And then to be able to understand and appreciate that others around us operate very differently than we do. Like we are, very different as human beings. We come with different backgrounds, expectations, experiences, traumas, and we have to like bring that into accountability and then shift our mindset and behavior to be more effective in the moment. And a lot of that ties in with that balancing act I talked about earlier of being task-oriented and people-oriented, and understanding what that balance looks like and what that balance feels like, I think more importantly.
Stacy, Patty, I know we talked about in our connection call, specifically around, do you believe, even with the training that's out there and the resources, do you believe empathy can be developed? I see some of the questions, right? Can I actually teach this thing?
Absolutely. So with empathy, a lot of times at its core, it's really grounded in three elements. So the emotional component, the behavioral component, and the cognitive component. And so a lot of times at its core, when we look at empathy, a lot of it is dictated by our natural tendencies, because those really inform, our disposition, what we're most comfortable, behaving in, what's our safe space essentially, and what our natural inclinations are. However, beyond that, there are definitely ways, especially from the behavioral and cognitive component, to really amplify empathy and really increase your ability in that space. And so from that lens, really, that's where perspective taking and active listening come into play, where you're really able to kind of take that step back, engage in that discovery, ask those probing questions to truly understand, validating, again, that's really important, validating what you're hearing from your employees, and then ultimately being a thought partner to them in either, helping them connect to the resources they need, or actually thinking through, what their solutions could be, or just equipping them so they can actually have the autonomy to figure out what's the best next step for them to overcome whatever challenges they're facing.
I think, yeah. So this is a little bit tangential to what you're saying. I agree with everything that you've said. And it really is about that, curiosity and understanding and questioning and really, seeking to understand the other person's experience. And, 100%, like we talked about before, when I first was in my therapy training, we would be, practicing on one another. And I was actually shocked when I had the experience of someone just listening to me and saying, this is what I hear. And, is this how you're feeling? And I was like, oh my God, nobody ever listens to me. It's like, because the experience was so mind blowing to really have someone not try to like put so much of themselves within the conversation. Like, I was really the focus. And so that's something that I was thinking about, but I'm also thinking about, and seeing some of the stuff in the chat is like, I think there, with empathy and some of the aversion or debate around this, to me, is that there's this sense of the demand that it puts on people to participate. Right. So like, bring your whole self and like, tell me it's like this bearing open of like, tell me everything that's happening in your life. And like, I think that some of the aversion comes from that, because they have this sense that that's what it means. And I think, this is where people are talking about boundaries, right? Like if we're doing a temp check and I, say all of these things that are happening in my life, and then the next person is like, yeah, I didn't sleep that well, I'm kind of hungry, going to have lunch after this. That's fine. That's fine. That's what I wanted to share. That's what they wanted to share. That's the lens I wanted people to have in my life. That's the lens they wanted. And that's acceptable. And it's important to recognize too, that culturally, some people's whole selves have been more accepted than others.
Correct.
And you cannot press people to show up in ways that you aren't willing to accept. And so I think that's like an underlying thing that we haven't kind of dug into that was rolling around in the back of my mind.
Oh, you got to repeat that, because that was a message just now. That was like a mic drop, gem.
I'm just going to leave the webinar now.
Yeah, look. No, because you just unraveled a whole nother piece there. That cultural piece, because if I think about it from a D&I perspective, that bring your authentic self, sometimes when certain people, specifically people of color or someone in an underrepresented group, bring their whole self, that whole self can be used against them, right? Or it's not accepted culturally, or they may not be the fit when that whole self is revealed. So I need you to repeat that just in case our community didn't hear it. And look, the chat is going off right now, okay?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I think I've really learned as I've, gone through this experience, read more, that, we had I think there was this real push of like authenticity and bring your whole self, and belonging means, XYZ. And then seeing, so many people, like you're saying, from underrepresented backgrounds saying like, I'm not bringing my whole self because my whole self isn't welcome.
Correct.
Why would I do that? It's not accepted. It's not comfortable. And that's, until an organization is going to be accepting of that, I'm not going to bring that. And I think also just, globally, culturally, you have some people who really just they don't want their lives and work to be that enmeshed. They want separation, and that it has to be accepted as well. So I think there's just a lot there in thinking about, when we talk about leading with empathy, it's also understanding those pieces. You can't demand someone to bring themselves into a work environment that's not safe.
Correct. Lauren, Patty, I see you shaking your head. So you have anything to add to that?
I think the only thing I'd add is the last little bit, Stacey, like that crossover between like work and personal life. Like I think in the realm of this topic, like it's so critical right now, as it's so enmeshed, as we're literally right now all from our homes in this, like, how do we like separate those boundaries? How do we define that for ourselves, communicate it to our organization, and have that like listened to, valued, understood, and have it not count against us?
Yes.
If we don't want to like enmesh those two things, if we want to say work is work to me, my personal life is my personal life, like they don't need to interact, which is a totally fine way to operate in a work environment.
Correct.
It's respecting that. It's respecting another person's perspective and like what they want.
Yes. Patty?
I'm in agreement with both sides. I think the one other thing to be mindful of is whenever we think of, groups of people, there are always going to be individual differences. And that to an extent adds a level of complication from a people manager perspective. And so at the end of the day, I think the main thing with empathy is literally creating that safe space so the person can tell you what they want and how they receive it best. And then as a manager, being able to, you have your natural management style, but then having the agility to flex to meet the needs of your people. So again, it does add a little bit of an extra complication and level of, challenge for the manager from that perspective of having to really flex, but it's really core to their role in order to really enable their people, support them in their growth and development, and make them feel safe at work. So
yeah, that flexibility and agility is key with empathy, because it says, you know what, I'm going to move, and we call it in coaching dancing with the client. I'm going to move as they right? I'm also going to be okay if there are areas or gaps that, I'm not familiar with. We can't be so much married to our own perspectives. We can't also be afraid of the things that we don't know. And if we are, that means it's time for exploration. There's a discovery that's needed in this process, and it's okay. That's the level of vulnerability that you're entering in with the person whom you are displaying empathy with. And it's fine. It's called growth. Okay. And that's why we are here today, because we are growing all together. So thank you again for that feedback. And thank you again for all of the amazing comments. Everyone is like, yes, I agree. Great point to Kel on saying that we have to require someone to share their whole life story or vice versa. We don't have to require that as leaders, and being okay with that. Some people have actually experienced some of the things that you all talked about here. And so I just want to pull it back into just the manager development. So as a leader, how can you demonstrate empathy to create that trust among your team and peers? What are some recommendations there? Don't all go at the same time. So respectful of one another. I love it.
I think one way is like also being vulnerable yourself as a leader, like showing it's okay, to want and need empathy. I think as leaders, we end up sometimes having to like put on these like very like, hard like shells in a way, and being, I think, a very vulnerable, like authentic leader and modeling it, like you said, like Cal, like that ends up, I think, actually having the biggest impact, because we see it actually happen. And like, we need to see it in like a broader sense within the organization.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, that just reminded me of a conversation I had not too long ago, where I was saying, like, when you come into a new organization, even if you've been there for a while, I think you're always kind of testing to see what's actually true, right? What's actually the norm? And so I said to someone, they said, oh, we trust you to do blah, blah, I'm like, great, but I'll know that's true when I see it happen. Like, know that I can make a mistake when I make one, and it's fine, right? Like, so you don't know until you see it, as you're saying, Lauren. And I think that's the thing too. It's like, until I can actually test it for myself, and I might do that by just a little poke at a time, right?
Mm-hmm.
I might not go too big, but until I kind of like start testing that out, I'm going to need to verify for myself what's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's, to your point, Lauren, like that's in a way what people are doing. It's like, okay, let me poke on this a little bit. That was safe. That seemed all right. Okay, I'll keep going. But they need that first.
Mm-hmm. And that accountability, because I see that through some of the comments, the accountability is key. If you want me to perform at my highest level, create space for me as your individual contributor, leader, manager, to also keep you accountable. What are your thoughts there?
I feel like I was waiting for Patty to jump in on that one.
Yes.
Apologies on that. I mean, I could jump in here. So with accountability, I think the main thing is creating those checkpoints built into one-on-ones or just separate spaces for that. And then the other thing with accountability, which we've said throughout, is being vulnerable and transparent. Because there are times where, things will come up and challenges get in the way. And so as a manager, if you can build that safe space where you yourself are, vulnerable, share whatever is getting in the way, and then also say, show that is in fact, something that your direct reports can do, that really helps from the accountability front. Because if your team members start seeing that they are facing barriers, rather than trying to go down a rabbit hole or avoiding or doing any of that, they feel comfortable coming to you, and you're then able to better support them going forward. So again, creating those spaces, creating time out of the one-on-ones to follow up, to ask those questions, and make sure that everyone's kind of moving along.
And I think and I completely agree, Patty. And I think on accountability too, like one of the things, I think going back to, I think Stacey, I can't remember if Stacey or Patty who mentioned it, but like rewarding it as in an organization, like and uplifting people and leaders who like show and engage in empathy, and holds people to accountability, because then people see, okay, like I am rewarded for doing this. I am not rewarded for not doing this. And so like humans love to be rewarded. Like we act in our own interest in that way. And so there's a way to like navigate accountability like into that and like build it into the structure and culture in your organization.
Thank you all for sharing. Kimberly says in the chat, good managers ask for feedback. So I'm assuming Kimberly says, ask the question, what should I stop or start or continue doing? Ozzy says some of the questions are how do we create a shared vision, encourages the heart, model the way, enable others to act, and then internal check-ins with the staff. And Sharon says, I think building relationships, being focused on the relationships as the relationship deepens. It shows commitment as well as it builds an opportunity to keep others accountable. So please keep your questions and your comments coming. I love them all. And so go ahead, Lauren, it looks like you were going to add to that.
Yeah, I think one thing I want to say on feedback specifically as it like revolves around empathy is, I think sometimes when we think of like empathy as this like really emotional, like touchy-feely kind of subject, and we're putting ourselves in someone else's like shoes in a way, or like trying to think like what it would be like to be them around feedback. I think some leaders can, especially if someone's like going through something, like can be very soft on feedback and like not have the real conversations that they need to have with their team, and give like truly like courageous and constructive feedback to their teams, and have those real conversations, because it's not empathetic to like hide that and like not tell someone something that they need to hear. It is empathetic to like really have a real honest and authentic conversation around things that you need to talk about in a business that might be hard to say, and doing that with kindness and empathy. Like there's a way to do that, and it's something that can be trained, and it's very nuanced, but like holding back and like not giving people hard feedback is like not an empathetic like thing to do.
Stacey, you're laughing over there.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I think there is, because you've seen some in the chat too. It is like this, touchy feely, and we can't say the things, and we'll hurt people's feelings. And it's like, if you are saying something with kindness, if you're saying something, you have a good feedback giving structure, right? It's not personality based. You're talking about behaviors and impacts, and and you're doing it with kindness. That's something that's going to help someone grow. That's going to demonstrate to them and to others within the team, the value of that. And so it is just another level. Like people have been asking, what is empathy beyond understanding? It is all of these things too, right? It's communication, it's creating psychological safety, it's providing, part of providing feedback. It isn't just a side skill, right? Like it permeates through a lot of different skills that are important in terms of, leading and managing people.
Yes, totally agree. And I just want to add a comment that kind of relates to what Stacey is saying. I think it's Hugh says, if you ask for feedback, you better be ready for the response. And that's a great point. And Patrick, I think, or Peter, that says, when you ask for feedback, don't take it to heart. Be ready to change and explore those areas for opportunities for growth. And so with that, before we close out, time has gone by so fast. We've been engaging and interacting with the community. The panelists have been awesome. We would like to share a poll with you all. So please don't leave yet. Don't jet out. A poll is going to pop up to identify which organization you want to connect with or just continue the conversation. So please be sure to select that, and then we will have our last question. All right. Well, I hope you were able to select which organization you would like to connect with. And so with that, like we always do in ThinkHuman fashion, we want to make sure we leave you with something to walk away with. And so just the thoughts from these brilliant leaders here on the line. What is that one thing, takeaway, practice, tool, technology that you would recommend to our community today?
I think the thing for me is like, I really want people to challenge the idea. Maybe they came in thinking empathy was one thing. Maybe the managers or the people in the organization think it's one thing. To have the ability to kind of challenge that and say, okay, it is about communication and understanding and building psychological safety. And it's actually all of these things. So to push back a little bit with that curiosity, right? So to do it where you're listening, where you're saying, what you've heard, and then I'm curious about this, I'm wondering, right? And really help probe and dig a little deeper into what some of those assumptions might be, and get people to really maybe expand how they're thinking about it.
Agree with that. I think the main takeaway that I would impart is, first and foremost, don't be intimidated by empathy. Really be open to it because it has so many benefits. And if you're intimidated by it, be intentional about it, kind of incorporating it into your interactions with your team going forward. Because not only being intentional helps help you prepare for those conversations and be just prepared for your direct reports to come with you along the journey and really share. But it also helps you ensure that you're doing it in a fair, equitable fashion, just, regardless of where your team is sitting, and really being able to figure out what works best for different team members of yours.
I love that, Patty. I think on my end, really, I think, it's really turning into a world where inclusion is so important that if you don't have empathy in the way that you're leading, if you're not able to truly understand other people's perspectives and their background and where they come from and what they're going through, you're going to have a problem as an organization, and you're going to have a problem attracting and retaining talent and keeping that engagement, like Patty's talked about so much, that feeling of belonging, of being heard, of being seen. That affects the bottom line. That affects the actual business and the business outcomes. And we talked about it earlier. These are not soft skills. These are power skills. These are the skills of the future. We have to uplift emotional intelligence, increase our ability to be empathic and understand and appreciate others, or we're going to have a real tough time growing businesses in the future.
Correct. Mic drop on that. And so with that, I want to leave you just with some encouraging words from our community. Someone said, I think it was Jessie Lou, said, the four of you should really start a podcast. Yay!
Love it.
Yes.
And
the rest of our community said, yes, I love this. This gave me so much energy, absolute truth, lead with the heart and love. And so with that, we give you back 1 minute. Thank you so much for your time. We love you, and go out there and be great. Bye.